In 2011, the omnibus NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, which is a giant omnibus bill that we yearly use to refund a lot of things, the military being primary among them, had two provisions slotted into it.
This was signed by Obama on the last day of the year 2011.
Yes, and the last day of the year 2011 is significant, not because it was a legally significant date, but it contained these two provisions, 1021 and 1022.
Okay.
The provisions, well, let's start with the signing. So he happened to be in Hawaii on December 31st.
Where his home was.
Right. There's a very, very good reason for him to be in Hawaii. However, by signing in Hawaii late in the day, that ensured,
on New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve. That ensured that the rest of the world would have moved on to New Year's Eve celebrations as was not paying attention to the news.
At least the rest of the U.S.
Right. And arguably, these two provisions end the U.S. Constitution. Now, I know how preposterous that sounds, and I agree that there are interpretations by which that would not be the case. But the problem is what these provisions do.
If I remember correctly, him signing this is part of why you could not bring yourself to vote for him a second time.
It is absolutely sufficient reason right there. And I will tell you a little bit of the history. So these provisions allow indefinite detention without charge or trial of any person, including American citizens, picked up anywhere on earth for effectively engaging in terrorism or supporting those who do. So my point, since the moment that this thing was signed, was terrorism is a magic word. When the executive branch uses that term, they are declaring your rights null and void. You don't have a Second Amendment right if the federal government has the right to put a black bag over your head and haul you off and not tell your family where you've gone and not there's no writ of habeas corpus. They don't have to charge you. You don't get the right to see the evidence against you. You don't have a right to privacy. All your rights.
You were a citizen. No, you're a terrorist.
Right. And this is the reason that you and I had a disagreement in the car is because with them using the term terrorism, there are now three tiers of citizens. There are fully compliant citizens who can go to whatever restaurant they want. There are uncompliant citizens who have resisted, let's say, vaccines that they are mandated to take and are now forbidden to go certain places. And then there is a third category, which is terrorists. And the problem is you have now seen what the federal government does with this definition.
So as you know, and as I think I've even made clear already here, this is by far worse than not being able to go in a restaurant because you're not vaccinated. But it feels to me like it is unnecessarily confusing and will actually make it hard to make the point to put these into a single category. You have, I think there's two categorization schemes here. You have, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And then you also have has been declared or has not been declared a terrorist. And maybe that's not quite the right naming of the categorization scheme over here. And there is, I think I said that wrong, but maybe I have to flip that one over. There is a lot of overlap between those two categorization schemes, or at least a lot of potential overlap between of course, you're still a citizen and you're vaccinated groups in the two categorization schemes, and they know you're not vaccinated, and at any moment we might declare you a terrorist group. I think there is likely to be some considerable overlap there, but they're not. As it is with the two different categorization schemes, they really are complete categories. There's not muddiness between them. You aren't members of two things within a single categorization scheme. You either are or you are not vaccinated. And of course, there is some muddiness there. Some places are now not letting you in if you're not boosted. So, what does fully vaccinated count for? That definition will move. But could you be declared a terrorist? Well, everyone could be. So everyone's in that could you be, given their definitions of mal, mis, and disinformation. But have you been is the category, and are you at risk of being is a squidgier category here. And I guess I would say this, between the NDAA of 2011 and the new thing from February 7th from the terrorism branch of the government, or whatever it is, we are in trouble. Well, we are in a lot of trouble as a country, as a democracy. That the fact that most people, the vast majority of people, won't have any awareness of either of these things. NDAA from end of 2011, so from just over 10 years ago, still most people don't have any idea of it, right? And you could, any random person on the street could legitimately claim, well, I just honestly don't know about that, right? And that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it any less terrifying, but they could honestly declare, and it could be true. And I think it is true for the vast majority of people. They don't know. Whereas that first tier, that first categorization of two tiers that I'm describing, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, in most places in this country, as far as I know, although I think that there are places like Florida and Texas where this is much less true, at least in the blue cities and the coasts, you actually cannot be existing in society and not know that there are now two tiers. If you have ever been asked to show your papers, and no, they don't use that language, but if you have been asked to just show your vaxport, then you know, and you have no excuse. And the fact that you are pretending not to know or pretending that it's not a big deal, that paves the way for this NDAA followed by the February 7th declaration or whatever it was called. And that is far worse. But what I'm saying is the thing that everybody does know, that there is no excuse. You can't ask someone on the streets of New York City or LA or Seattle or a whole bunch of other cities, did you know that that if you don't have evidence of vaccine, you can't get into restaurants? Of course they know, because they've shown their papers every time they have gone in. Of course they know.
Well,
and so they are complicit.
I think they don't have any right not to know. It's in front of them. I think many
they
people
know if they are showing their passports, which they are.
Well, there's a question about what no means. And look, I'm as troubled about this as anyone. But the question is, how is the magic trick done?
Yes.
Right? And this is falling into
it's these two things, and they're distinct strategies, I believe.
That's fine. But to the extent that people are hearing about the NDAA 2012 for the first time here.
So why do we call it the NDAA 2012?
Because it was the 2012 bill in which these were inserted.
Oh, so he signed it on the last day of 2011, but it's
the 2012 bill.
Okay.
Here's the thing. You should check out the New York Times from the following day. Right? The New York Times has complete PDF versions.
From January 1st, 2012.
Yes. Now, many of us.
Pull it up, or
you're going to have a hard time finding it. But
okay.
I have been through it with a fine-tooth comb. Now, if somebody can find it in there, great. I'm all ears. But my claim is, you can see the ACLU, which used to be a civil rights litigation organization. It's now become a woke monstrosity. Mm-hmm. But the ACLU will validate that at least the interpretation I've given you is a credible interpretation. Mm-hmm. It's not just me and the ACLU saying that. What you will also be unlikely to know is that Chris Hedges and Noam Chomsky sued the Obama administration over these two provisions. A federal court ruled that Chris Hedges had standing to sue, that he was in fact in danger of being targeted because he had interviewed members of Al-Qaeda, and the way these provisions are written, that could plausibly put him in danger of being indefinitely detained.
So let me just, since you had me show this site before, the ACLU says, the breadth of this is again from 2012, back when the ACLU was doing the honorable work that the ACLU was formed to do, rather than becoming the woke monstrosity it has become now. The breadth of the NDAA's worldwide detention authority violates the Constitution and international law because it is not limited to people captured in an actual armed conflict as required by the laws of war. And then just next paragraph. Although President Obama issued a signing statement saying he had, quote, serious reservations about the NDAA's detention provisions, the statement only applies to how his administration would use them and would not affect how the law is interpreted by subsequent administrations.
Yes.
And the provisions, parenthetical, are inconsistent with fundamental American values.
They are inconsistent with absolutely fundamental values that actually go way before the U.S. Constitution, right? Mm-hmm. Writ of habeas corpus, for example.
Right.
So... Among other things, what we know is that a federal court ruled that this was a plausible interpretation enough that they were willing to hear it, right? The law was suspended as a result of that. And then a 3-judge federal panel reversed that and put it back into force. Now, here's the problem. An ordinary law, were it to be used against you, there would be a mechanism for dealing with it, right? There would be a court, and you could argue that this was unconstitutional. In this case, what the executive branch has effectively done is it has given itself the ability to declare someone a terrorist,
right,
have that person disappear, not explain where they've gone until the end of hostilities. So presumably that's the moment at which on a planet of nearly 8 billion people, there are no more terrorists. It is an implausible moment. They have given themselves the ability to detain somebody without explaining where they went, without showing anybody evidence. And so...
Did you say it's until hostilities cease?
The end of hostilities.
The end of hostilities.
The end of hostilities, which is obviously an absurdity. They've declared the entire world a battlefield. They've said terrorism is the style of battle. They get to define who's a terrorist. And then you will be returned at the end of hostilities, which couldn't possibly ever happen because there will always be terrorists.
I mean, and there's no description of how the COVID pandemic ends. It's the same thing with the war on drugs. It's all of these things. We establish something with which we then use to grant ourselves special powers, and there is no termination condition.
Right. So again, this is the most special of laws because there's no check on it. Even if you say that's impossible that any court would listen to such a law, the question is, well, if you disappear and your family doesn't know where you've gone, right, because they've decided that you're a terrorist and they can detain you someplace and never tell anyone what happened, you're just a missing person. How do you get to a court and say the federal government has violated, my right to see the evidence against me? There's no court.
Yeah.
And so anyway, again, you can say that's preposterous. Your interpretation is bizarre. But the point is, first of all, a federal court said that Chris Hedges had standing to sue, that he was in danger of this happening to him. Mm-hmm. So it's that credible. Yeah. Right. And I will also point out that when the Obama administration responded, their bizarre response to this suit was not, we don't have those rights. That's not what it says. Their response was, we already had those rights. So in any case,
it does point out also how much the disintegration of once honorable and absolutely necessary organizations like the ACLU has also paved the way for what we're living through now. Right. There were plenty of people who disagreed with particular things that the ACLU may have done, but they were consistent. They defended everyone who was having their rights trampled. And now what they're doing is shutting you down if you think men can't become women.
Right.
That seems to be the reigning issue of the day for them.
Well, men can't become women is malinformation. It's a fact. You see? But
I don't think it's malinformation in this case because malinformation requires out of context. So is saying anything without context inherently malinformation because it needs to be their context?
All I said was men can't become women. What context?
But that's what I just said. So malinformation requires that it be out of context, I believe.
Well, first of all, the opinion in this case of whether or not there is or is not context coming as it does from a misdis and malinformer herself,
indeed,
is effectively null and void because, I mean, look, the reason that you haven't yet been hauled off to be indefinitely detained without the right to see the evidence against you is simply the good graces of the federal government, which you apparently still exist in.
Indeed.
Anyway, look, it's a Kafka trap, right? And it's right there on this Department of Homeland Security website.
Yep.
They're not hiding it. It's written in garbageese, but you can sort your way through it. And the answer is, look, this is actually the thing we were warned about. It just is, right? This is the tyranny. It's not ambiguous, right? This is them declaring factual information that might cause people to be upset and not trust the federal government as terrorism, and then declaring that they have rights when it comes to terrorists that extend up to everything, right? Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's check and mate, right? They just did it to us, right? Yep. You can't say facts without them declaring you a terrorist, and if you're a terrorist, they can do anything they want to you. You have no constitutional rights. This isn't tyranny? How is that not tyranny?
Right. You can talk about the weather.
No.
Probably not.
No. Here's what you do. If you don't want to fall under their definition of mis, dis, and malinformation, the MDM of it all, if you want to avoid that, you take the thing that we used to be told, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, and you just do the last part of that. Mm-hmm. You just don't say anything at all.
Yeah. Could you please shut up already? Yeah. And next time we're not going to ask nicely. That's what it is. That's what we are being told.
Right. It's a shot across the bow. Now, do I expect to be disappeared? I do not, because that would cause a problem, which is that it would reveal what they're up to. Right. But there's a reason that they are moving the chess pieces around the board this way. And we, of course, will be the last to know what the reason is.
And I guess just to return to what seems like a disagreement, but I don't think really is, I think these are two sets of strategic moves that are happening in parallel. One of them is not noticed by almost anyone because almost no one is paying attention to the NDAA and the terrorism declaration from February 7th of this year. But the fact that everyone who lives in most of the highly populated areas of the United States has encountered either being asked to show their papers or knowing that because they have no papers, they cannot go places, knows damn well what is happening. And if they are not looking that squarely in the face and going, this harkens bad things, then they need to start doing that. You need to at least recognize that this is exactly that serious. And no, what's happening in Canada is not about people saying you should not be allowed to take a vaccine. It is about vaccine mandates. It is the mandates. And, obviously all of this conversation about NDAA and such has been US specific, but, as Jordan Peterson's recent conversation with the Honorable Brian Peckford, who I mentioned on last week's live stream, but didn't say a whole lot about, he's the former First Minister from Newfoundland, who is the one remaining living member of the framer of the Constitutional Charter from 1981 or 82 in Canada, is bringing a lawsuit against Canada because what is happening there is fundamentally unconstitutional. And I see no similar thing happening here, but it needs to. And frankly, what's happening with Peckford in Canada is absolutely 100% supported and revealed to be supported by many Canadians by what is happening in Ottawa and also at Coutts and at the Ambassador Bridge.
Okay. And for my part, I will say we have to return to William Binney's formulation here. William Binney being an NSA officer who became a whistleblower. And when interviewed, what he said was holding his...
This is when?
Would have been a decade ago.
Okay.
He said, we are this close to a turnkey totalitarian state, right? And the key insight here is turnkey, right? A totalitarian state that doesn't feel like a totalitarian state until they turn the key. And the point is the fact that state is being erected around you is on the Department of Homeland Security's website, right? Yep. Right down to their propagandistic graphic novels and their absurd invitation to pre-bunk stuff, right? This is the turnkey totalitarian state putting up the last little pieces of the structure that allows them, look, you've got a set of definitions that no one who has not taken a vow of silence could possibly escape, right? You're going to be guilty of misdis or malinformation, whatever you do, and that means that any day they can decide your constitutional rights are no longer rights at all, which means that your constitutional rights are a privilege. They've rendered these things a privilege, and that's what a totalitarian state would do. So have they turned the key? Will they turn the key? We don't know, but we need to understand that the danger of the turnkey totalitarian state is not the turning of the key. The danger is the erection of the thing which they've done.